Hello everyone, welcome to my channel.
The summer heat hung heavy as we drove into Blackwood National Forest. The dusty dirt road wound like a snake between ancient pines, their tops scraping the sky like claws. Connor, as always, was behind the wheel, his fists gripping the steering wheel of the old Ford. Beside him, in the passenger seat, sat Sarah, nervously fidgeting with her backpack strap. I was in the back, sandwiched between two mountains of gear, trying to see something beyond the flickering trees.
Connor grunted, glancing at the worn map on the dashboard. The map marks this spot, and the locals I asked pointed this way. The locals who looked at you like you were crazy? I added, recalling the unkind stares we'd caught at the last roadside diner. Connor just grinned. He was always like that, an adventurer who didn't believe in ghosts but happily sought them out. Sarah, his girlfriend, was more cautious, but she was drawn to his reckless energy. And me? I was between them, a photographer, always ready to capture something unusual. The deeper we drove into the forest, the darker it became. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, and the air grew noticeably cooler. The trees stood so close together that they seemed to whisper to each other, their branches intertwined, forming strange, menacing shapes. "Look!" Sarah exclaimed, pointing ahead. Ahead, through the thick brush, we saw the rusty remnants of an old sign. The inscription was barely legible, but we could make out Crow Ridge, private property, no trespassing. Connor braked, and the car came to a stop. We got out, and the silence of the forest descended upon us. It wasn't an ordinary silence, but one that seemed to swallow sound, making the world around us unnaturally muffled. "Well, this is it," Connor said, his voice a little louder than usual to cut through the oppressive quiet. "Get ready for an adventure, guys." We walked past the sign, and a path, barely visible beneath a layer of fallen leaves, led us deeper into the thicket. With each step, the atmosphere grew heavier. The air seemed permeated with anticipation, something ancient and malevolent. Soon we stumbled upon the first signs of the abandoned campsite. A rusty grill, a leaning wooden table, a couple of dilapidated tent sites. Everything was covered in moss and overgrown with grass, as if nature was trying to reclaim these remnants of human presence. We chose one of the tent sites that seemed relatively flat and began to set up camp. As we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every rustle in the bushes, every creak of a tree made me jump. "Stop being so nervous, Jake," Connor teased, noticing my anxious gaze. "It's just the woods." "Just woods that are rumored to be cursed," Sarah mumbled, but her voice no longer held its former apprehension. She seemed to be succumbing to Connor's enthusiasm. By dusk, we had a small campfire burning. The flames danced in the darkness, casting strange shadows on the surrounding trees. We ate canned chili and told stories. Connor, as always, was in his element, recounting his past adventures. I sat staring into the fire, but my thoughts were far away. I still felt that gaze. It was more than just nerves. It was a premonition. As night fully descended, the forest around us came alive.
not with the sounds of animals, but with something else. In the distance, we heard strange, dull thuds, as if someone was methodically hitting a tree. "What's that?" asked Sarah, pressing closer to Connor. Connor frowned. "No idea. Probably a woodpecker or—"
Suddenly, the sounds stopped. Silence descended upon us again, but this time it was filled with tension. Then, from deep within the forest came a piercing, unnatural howl. It was far from an ordinary coyote's howl. There was something deeply primal, inhuman about it. Sarah screamed. Connors stood up, holding a branch like a club. "Hey," he shouted into the darkness, "is anyone there?" In response, only the echo of his own voice, swallowed by the forest.
We sat by the fire, listening to every rustle. But there was no more howling, no more thuds, only the whisper of the wind in the treetops, which now seemed sinister. "Maybe it's just animals?" Sarah tried to say, but her voice sounded unconvinced. Connor shook his head. "I've never heard anything like it." We slept little that night. Every few hours I would wake up, feeling like someone was watching us. I even went out of the tent to look around, but always saw only darkness and the ghostly silhouettes of trees. The next morning, with the first rays of sun, our fear receded a little. We decided to explore the campsite further. Maybe we could find an explanation for the strange sounds.
We discovered an old moss-covered well and a dilapidated ranger's hut. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust and dirt. Inside the hut, we found some old tools, torn maps, and a thick book whose cover had almost completely disintegrated. Connor carefully picked up the book. It was a diary. The pages were yellowed and covered in small, illegible handwriting. "This looks like a ranger's diary," he said, flipping through the pages. "Some of the entries are very strange." We sat on a log by the hut, and Connor began to read aloud, stumbling over faded ink and outdated phrasing. The diary belonged to a Thomas Black, who worked as a ranger in Crow Ridge in the early 20th century. At first, the entries were quite ordinary, about the weather, the condition of the trails, encounters with wild animals. But gradually, the tone changed. There were mentions of strange sounds, unexplained occurrences, and an invisible presence.
August 12th, 1917. Those sounds again, as if someone is walking through the forest on two legs, but I see no one. The steps are heavy. The ground shakes. September 25th, 1917. Bill Johnson, who came here to fish, has disappeared. I found his boat, but no trace of Bill himself. No one believes it, but I feel it's connected to what dwells here. November 3rd, 1917. I saw it, for a moment, through the trees. A tall, dark creature that moves silently. Its eyes, they were like embers in the dark. It's not an animal. It's something ancient and evil. The last entry was written in shaky handwriting, and the ink was smudged as if the author was in a panic. December 15th, 1917. It came. It stands outside my cabin. I hear its breath. It knows I'm here. Can't write any more. If anyone finds this diary, run. Run from Crow Ridge. The entry broke off there. The last page
was torn out. We sat in complete silence, stunned by what we had read. The ranger's diary was not just an old book. It was a dying message, a cry for help from the past. This is just a story, Sarah tried to say, but her voice was barely audible. Connor, who was usually so skeptical, looked pale. Too many coincidences. The howling, the thuds, and now this diary. I felt a chill run down my spine. Everything we had heard last night, all my premonitions, seemed to be confirmed by these old, faded words. "We need to get out of here," I said, my words firm. "Right now." Connor nodded. "I agree. This place, it's wrong." We hastily packed up camp, our movements frantic. Every rustle in the forest made us jump. Every bush seemed to hide a threat. Every tree seemed to watch us. When we were almost ready, I heard something. A quiet, muffled chuckle that seemed to come from right behind our tent. It was so faint that I thought I had imagined it. But then it repeated, a little louder, and I saw the hair on Sarah's arms stand on end. Connor froze, his gaze fixed on the spot where the sound came from. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice tense. The laughter stopped. Silence fell again. Then, from behind the tent, slowly, as if from nowhere, a dark figure emerged. It was a tall, slender creature with long, thin limbs. Its body was covered in dark, rough skin that seemed to absorb the light. The most terrifying thing was its face. It had no eyes, just two empty, dark sockets, and a wide, unnatural smile, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. It looked at us, and its smile widened. Then it made a sound that was both a hoarse whisper and a piercing howl that chilled us to the bone. "Run!" Connor yelled, and we bolted.
We ran headlong, without looking back, through the thick undergrowth, stumbling over roots and branches. Fear gave us strength, but we knew it wouldn't last long. We heard it behind us, heavy footsteps, raspy breathing, and occasionally that terrible, muffled chuckle. The forest around us seemed to have changed. The trees grew denser, their branches clutching at our clothes, trying to hold us back. I looked back over my shoulder and saw it following us, easily overcoming obstacles that were agonizing for us. Its dark silhouette flickered between the trees, relentlessly approaching. Sarah tripped and fell. Connor immediately stopped to help her. I stopped too, knowing I couldn't leave them. The creature was just a few meters from us. It stopped, its grin widening even further. I could feel the cold emanating from it even at a distance. "What is it?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with terror. Connor pulled a small pocket knife from his pocket, but it was useless. What could steel do against such a creature? It slowly raised its long, bony arm, pointing at us. Then it opened its mouth, and a stream of dark, viscous shadows poured out, beginning to coalesce in the air.
It was something out of the worst nightmares. Something that should never have existed. Suddenly, from nowhere, a sharp sound rang out. It was the sound of a gunshot. The creature recoiled, its body twitching. The shadows it had been emitting dissolved into the air. Then, from deep within the forest, an elderly man appeared with a rifle in his hands. He was dressed in old, worn clothes and looked as if he had spent his entire life in the woods. "Get out of here!" he shouted, his voice hoarse but full of determination. "It will be back." We didn't need a second invitation. We bolted again, past the old man, who continued to stand there, covering our retreat. We heard another shot, and then a creepy, inhuman scream that seemed to shake the entire forest. We ran until our lungs burned, until our legs refused to obey us. We burst onto the same dirt road we had come in on, and there our car seemed like a beacon of salvation. We jumped in. Connor started the engine and we sped away, dust flying from under the wheels. We didn't look back. We just drove until we were out of Blackwood Forest, until we saw the first signs of civilization. When we finally stopped at a gas station, a few miles from the forest, we were dirty, scared, and shaken to our core. We never found out what happened to the old man who saved us. We never found out what that creature was. But one thing we knew for sure: Crow Ridge was cursed, and we would never return to that forest again. Many years have passed since that day. Connor, Sarah, and I finished university, started our lives, but the memories of Crow Ridge never left us. Every time we return to nature, every hike in the forest is always accompanied by that shadow of terror we experienced. Sometimes at night, when I lie in my bed, I can still hear its laughter, and I still see its empty eye sockets and its terrible smile. And I know it's still there, deep in Blackwood Forest, waiting for the next group of unwary travelers who dare to step into the shadows of Crow Ridge.
Good night. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.